there's a push from the Trump administration to fire more federal workers, a lot more. But there's a little confusion in the air because recently when the president was talking about the layoffs, he said the Democrats were going to get laid off. The Democrats were going to get cut, which left a lot of people scratching their head. What do you mean? Do you talking about the federal worker that has a left-leaning political ideology? How would that even work? There's no block on the SF-50 on your personal records. It doesn't say what political party you're a part of or what did you vote last election. None of that exists. So it's real interesting that he used the words that he used, but I'm going to let you be the judge. Check this video out right here.
Why is it necessary to link more federal jobs cut to a shutdown?
Well, the Democrats want to shut it down, and so when you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and the Democrats, they're going to be Democrats. As you know, this country, no country can afford to pay for illegal immigration help.
So I think that in his head, what he was trying to do is blame the Democratic Party for the cuts in the federal workforce, but it came out the wrong way. It came out kind of jumbled up. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. Now, a couple days later, the vice president, he's talking to the press and he clarifies they're not cutting based on political ideology. They don't even really want to cut. That's what the vice president says. He's like, we don't really want to cut. We're kind of getting forced into this, which I don't think very many people believe. Most people believe they definitely want to cut, but that's what he said. How would that even look like, though? Like, hypothetically, if you were doing a thought exercise, what does the federal workforce, how is it made up, politically speaking? How do people vote in the federal government? Well, you can look at some GAO reports, you can look at some Pew Research, and generally the consensus is 60% Democrat, 30% Republican, and 10% independent. So it's not a workforce that's completely made of progressives. And even the individuals that do vote Democrat, you could be talking about somebody more in the center. You're not talking about somebody on the far edges, far left radical, as the Trump administration likes to put it, far left radical. That's not the entire federal workforce. So the vice president goes on to pay the federal workforce a lot of compliments. He said that this country needs air traffic controllers. They need the food subsidy programs for low-income Americans to provide them with food in their belly. All these things are needed. They're going to try to figure out a way to make sure essential services are not broken throughout the country. And if he had to guess, the shutdown wouldn't last that long. That's how he put it. This is just a spitball guess. Basically, he's implying he doesn't really have insider information, but he doesn't anticipate the shutdown to go on for much longer because he believes Democratic senators will face enough pressure. Well, they will eventually vote with the Republicans. That's his belief. Now, in the same breath, he mentioned laying off a lot of federal workers. And the reason for it is because they have to save costs. They have to cut costs. They have to save money, which is a little interesting because if you know anything about a government shutdown, you know that it costs money. It costs a lot of money. Over $100 million a day for each day the government is shut down. So ask yourself right now, is this really about money? I think that if you do a deep search, you will find out, no, it is not about money. When you're talking about cuts to the federal workforce, you're talking about an almost insignificant percent that you're saving. You know, if you did a 50% cut, you're saving 2%. But the vice president did seem really confident, and he seemed really competent in the way that he expressed his message. I almost believed it. You know, just the way that he speaks. He's a good speaker. He's a very good speaker. And I was believing the words that were coming out of his mouth. And then I had to do a second take and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Now, in addition to that, we also see, we saw something really interesting happening with federal workers. This came out of the education department, but I'm pretty sure other agencies, they're doing the same thing. And basically, they're taking the furloughed workers and they're rewriting their out of office message. If you don't know what an out of office message is, it's when you go on Microsoft Outlook and you type in a message when you're not going to be working that day. So whether it's a holiday, a weekend, your day off, you're taking sick leave, you input a message like, I'm not here today. I'll be back in the office next Tuesday. Please contact so-and-so if you want, assistance with a certain program, a certain task. You type it up. Now, What's being written instead is the agencies are putting in there, thank you for contacting me, but unfortunately, Democratic senators are responsible for the government shutdown. So I don't have to tell you this. It's never been done before. This is yet another concerted effort in order to get the public completely bought in with the idea of the Democrats are responsible for this shutdown. Now, you can look at it a couple different ways. All right? You could say that the Democrats didn't vote with the Republicans to pass a clean CR, and they are at fault. They are definitely at fault. They want over $1 trillion. You can make an argument. You can make a good case for that. But on the Republican side, I don't believe I heard not one time where a compromise was trying to be reached. Like, okay, so the Democrats, they want $100 billion a year for the premium subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. That's what they want, right? I haven't seen a counter proposal. How about $25 billion? How about we reduce some of those subsidies so that the average American will have to pay more in healthcare, but it won't be 3 times as much. Those conversations about let's meet in the middle, that's not really happening. Now, from the Republican perspective, they're saying, well, why should we compromise? We hold a majority in the House, in the Senate. We won the presidential election by a landslide, they say, roughly 2 million votes in the popular vote, right? So it depends on, what do you think? Do you believe that elected representatives, even if they represent a minority, should still represent their constituents' best interests and a compromise should be reached? If you believe that, then there should be a compromise of some sort. If you don't, if you think majority rules and then, whatever the Republicans say goes, then yeah, the Democrats are to blame. So if you're impacted right now by the government shutdown, let's say you're furloughed. There's over 500,000 workers that are furloughed. What should you be focused on while you're not getting paid, while you're sitting at home? The first thing I want to tell you, I want to stress to you, is you do not waste a minute thinking about something you don't control. When will the shutdown end? I don't know. You don't know. The people we know don't know. Nobody knows when the shutdown will end, truly. So I wouldn't focus on that. I wouldn't think about that. Is it going to be next week, next month? Who knows? What about when are you going to get paid? You're going to get back pay. You're going to get back pay at some point, but we don't know when. So instead of focusing energy on things that you cannot control, that'll lead you down a path of anxiety, frustration, resentment, and contempt. Try not to go down that path. Instead, think about what you're doing right now. What are you focused on while you're not working? Because you absolutely have control over that. Are you doing something to perhaps escape from the stress and the anxiety and the drama? Maybe you're going for a walk around the park. Maybe you're reading a book, doing a little fishing. I don't know what you like to do. Something that kind of decompresses you. Probably should do that. And once you're done with that, at least for a certain portion of the day, I would definitely update your resume. Update that resume. You do not want to update your resume once the RIF notice hits your inbox. That's not the time. Once the termination letter hits your inbox, that is not the time to update your resume. You do it now. You update that thing now. And then you start applying. You start getting feelers. Is there any interest in your skill set? Do you have to adapt? Do you have to learn new skills? Do you have to meet new people? What do you have to do to increase your market value in the job market? That's the question. Devote a certain amount of time into doing that, and then that way you have more control over your future. You're not caught off guard. In addition to that, if you find yourself more and more concerned about potential mass layoffs during this government shutdown, this is a technique that the administration, the president, has used in order to put more pressure on Democratic senators. But if you're really worried about that and you want to know how that's unlawful and how that's not probable, and if you want to know a different perspective on that when it comes to the actual laws that we're supposed to follow as a country, if you're interested in that, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.